Hey gang, Neil here once again. This is going to be the part 2 of the cast painting demo. I'd mentioned with the last session that the point was to take you from the sphere to the bowling pin, obviously increasing in complication of the form, to the cast, again increasing from the bowling pin. So taking you through those steps to go through the painting procedure, but also with the last demonstration on the cast, bringing up and mentioning that I use in the studio here a 3-step painting procedure, right? If you remember, 3 F's: fill, form, and finish. So where we started with the sphere and the bowling pin with getting all the modeling factors in, right, all 9 modeling factors: highlight, light, light, middle light, dark light, halftone, light shadow, middle shadow, dark shadow, accents where they occur. That all really in my painting process is the fill layer, the initial layer, where the point is, the goal is to quickly and broadly capture how light falls across an entire form. Then the latter 2 stages, forming and finishing, that's where I go back into that initial broad, loose lay-in and add all the relevant details, details and gradations that I glossed over and simplified in the initial fill layer. And obviously we're only working in monochrome here. When it's full color situation, I not only have to get the form and value changes that I may have simplified in the fill layer, but I have to get the hue and chroma changes in as well. So this is part 2 then. I put the fill layer in. The fill layer, again, repetition is the mother of skill. I get all the modeling factors in that are necessary to, for the least amount or the minimum amount. Let's see. The modeling factors are designed to get the minimum amount of value changes in each area to make form, right? If you remember the law of transition, also called the rule of 3, it takes a minimum of 3 value changes to make a gradation. And making gradations is what form is all about. So by getting all the modeling factors in, I know I have the least amount of modeling factors necessary in the light to make form: light, light, middle light, dark light. The least amount of value changes in the shadow to make form, necessary to make form in the shadow: light shadow, middle shadow, dark shadow. And a halftone, a dividing value, whether I gradate or blend for it or actually put it in. The halftone is a bridging value that links together light and shadow. So 3 lights, 3 shadows linked by a halftone, and then of course the extremes, the highlights and accents where they are. So I got that in the fill layer. Forming and finishing is just going back into that and adding all the details, value changes, etc. that I simplified at the beginning. So we'll shift over to the camera. And hopefully tonight I will keep my big noggin out of the picture as much as possible. So left off, and this is wet. Now the forming and finishing can be done whether it's wet or dry. It's certainly, while it's wet, it's a more advantageous situation because although couching, as we've talked about, the 2 application methods, mosaic and couching, couching takes a little more control because you're adding wet paint into wet paint. It also, though, as I've mentioned, you do have the opportunity for it's much easier to create your gradations with couching than it is with putting a mosaic in. The mosaic, I'm butting those values up against each other, and either with parallel or perpendicular blending, I've got to pull those together to create a smooth gradation. As we've talked about, sometimes you actually have to go the extra length, the extra mile, and go back in and apply bridging values if the parallel or perpendicular blending doesn't give you what you need. So because this is wet, it does make it easier to get some of these smooth gradations, but the difficulty in couching is sometimes I have to work extra hard to get a particular gradation because all of the paint is mixing together, right? Sometimes I have to overdo the value change, overdo the tonal value, right? The value that I grab from my palette. Sometimes I have to overdo the value just to get everything to mix properly on my canvas. So But as I said, you can do the forming and finishing even if it's dry. You just have to go back through and re-wet everything with fresh paint and break it down into more subtle value changes. And that's the key. That's the key to forming and finishing, is you're adding smaller value divisions, smaller value steps to create the forms that are within these large areas that I initially put in. So, with that said, we will get started. Now, with you remember with the fill layer, we started with the background, then the middle shadow, then the light, and went everything in between. Forming, in particular, forming and finishing, and let me pause here to describe the division between the two. Forming is just what I've been mentioning, where you're going back into that initial fill layer, and you're adding in all the subtle value changes and forms that you simplified. I've said that now multiple times. That may take a series of passes depending on how complicated the form is. It might take multiple passes to bring it up to the degree of polish that you're looking for to get all those forms in. Finishing then, so that's forming. Forming is you're going back over every single area slowly and getting your forms and values in. Finishing then is the last step where you are making small modifications of drawing and value. Or full color, would be value, hue, and chroma. Small amounts of work. Might be slight drawing adjustments, might be going in and fixing certain, in this case, value changes that weren't as smooth as I wanted, or if I missed modeling a form. But finishing is small work. Forming is really where you're slowing down and going across the whole thing and slowing down and hitting every area to give it its due. So, forming then, as I mentioned, I already went through with the fill stage, background, middle shadow, light, and everything between. When I get to this forming stage, I want to start in what is called the light effect. The light effect is the largest area of the lightest light. It's not the highlight, it's the largest area of the lightest light that I see when I squint until my eyes are almost closed. So you remember from the last discussion, there are multiple lights on this form because lights are in the front, top, side, left orientation, right? We're thinking spatially. Front, top, side, left, those are the planes that are getting hit the most. The lights are in those front, top, side, left orientation, right? Lights, it's our nomenclatural description of form. Where I'm looking to start when I do my forming is the largest of the light areas because it becomes the key for all the other lights. So when I squint until my eyes are almost closed, the largest, lightest area is up in here. So that's where I'm going to start. Slowly working out from there, restating values as necessary, creating smoother gradations, and value changes where necessary. Now, the nice thing about, grab my brush here, the nice thing about the fill, form, finish working method is the fill layer is a rehearsal, right? Or I shouldn't say a rehearsal. It lays out an outline of my value structure. So when I'm going in with my forming, if I put in a light, and middle light in this upper area, and I was using, say, an 8 or 8 plus to a 7, then any modification I make in this area as I form it is going to be plus or minus 8 or 7. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I already know basically where the values are. I just have to nudge them, make more subtle divisions between them to smooth out and polish the form. So, starting in the light effect. I'm going to hit these lights again just to touch them up and move on from there. The other thing is, you noticed last night, last night, I guess you know when I filmed this, with the last video, that the areas of paint were put in broadly, very large areas of paint. With the forming, I'm going to use smaller brush strokes because I'm making smaller form and value statements, or value and form statements. So I'm not looking to move fast now. I'm looking to really slow it down. And the slowing down even means smaller brush marks to make sure I'm not bypassing any of these value changes. I'm not going to do the entire painting just because that would take too long, but I'm at least going to hit a few of these areas so that you're clear. Now, regrettably, it's probably a little difficult to see what's going on, as I can see the contrast is a little high, but I assure you I'm creating more subtle gradations with the work that I'm doing. Always squinting to make sure my value relationships are still on track. And of course, I have access to my isolation cards. Every once in a while I want to stop and check what I'm doing. Make sure I'm on the right track. And as I move around then, I am slowly making my way up or down the value scale, and not whole steps, usually a lot of half and quarter steps to get my values in the right range. Once you do a lot of the fill stages, once you do that quite a bit, you'll be able to knock a fill layer in very quickly. I mean, obviously, we don't want just speed. We want accuracy with the speed. If you're going to put it in, you want to make sure it's not fast and sloppy, but fast and accurate. The forming stage, everything slows down. Everything slows down. And as I said, it could take multiple layers of this fill stage. I mean, depending on the complexity, if I were working on a large head cast or a portrait, in one sitting, I might only form and finish one area. And then with the next sitting, go back in and form and finish another area. So it's going to require patience. I mean, again, you see how small the brushwork is. There's nothing broad about this. Moving across. I moved out from here. And I know with me, sometimes just maybe it's adult onset attention deficit disorder. I can only really focus on a certain area for so long before I just need to move on. And what I mean is move on, just move into another area, like kind of resolving everything like you're turning the focus ring on a camera. I'm bringing it all up at the same time rather than just staying in one particular area and hyper-modeling it. That's just the way I tend to work. Obviously, you guys and gals in the privacy of your own studio, you can apply the information any way you see fit. It's entirely up to you. I'm just here to make suggestions. That's it. So I moved this direction. I'm going to hit the upper lip and then move up into the top plane. I think the upper lip is not too far off value-wise, but I can see there's a gradation. It gets darker here and darker there. What I think I'm missing is some of the amplitude or the rate of curvature of the boundary of the lip. I think that's what needs to be brought up a little bit. I think I mentioned the last video. One of these videos I'll get into the different types of paint marks that we use, or that I use. Right? I shouldn't say we. Everyone does their own thing. In the end, though, there are always so many ways you can put a brush down on a canvas, so I think we're probably all doing very similar things. We just have different names for them. Too dark. Moving up the value scale. Moving up a lot lighter than I think I actually need, or than I actually need, but again, with couching, gotta be push and pull these values to get them to go where I need to go, where they need to go. The other reason I tend to move around a little bit instead of staying in one area is, even with after all the 20 some odd years of painting, it's still easy to lose my objectivity in a certain area unless I move off of it and come back. I can lose the overall structure, get too involved. I'm too focused on one area. Starts to make it, it can get easy to lose how that area is supposed to look in context of the larger area. So, as I said, I'll just move around a little bit here just as an idea of what a forming process would look like. I know the three-step process, at least, certainly, I'm sure you've got historians, art historians out there that may or may not be listening to this, but I ran across a book by, or on Sir Anthony Van Dyck, the 16th century, 17th century painter. Now I can't remember. I've got a little bout of old head. But it specifically mentions he had a three-stage working method. It's called La Grande Manera, the Grand Manner. The initial layer was, of course, now I'm going to probably butcher the pronunciation, but I'm going to have at it. La Maniera Lavata, which was the wash-in. That was the initial thin application of color. La Maniera Spozzata, I believe, which is the forming layer where he's doing a majority of his modeling, and La Maniera Finita, the finishing layer, which included glazing and touch-ups. So it's not to say that, that's the only way to work, but it just goes to show there's nothing new under the sun. I thought I'd really gotten it down by breaking it into three for ease of memory, and then I come to find out, yeah, I'm not as brilliant as I thought. So it had been figured out a long time ago. It's always been one of my favorite verses from the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes. There's nothing new under the sun. That is true. So, starting to model, right? Turn the lip a little bit more. It gets darker. I'm going to move over here because this is an area that particularly I really simplified. I eliminated that upper lip for the time being for the sake of the unity of that area. Just a little blending right here. A little bit of perpendicular blending. Right now we have some blending directions to consider. And over here in particular, I'm going to have to lighten this area up just a little bit. I put it in as a dark light, which it is because it is a front side right plane turning away from the direct light. It's not in shadow, but it's certainly turning away from the direct light more than other areas. But there are areas in here that are coming in or turning into the light just a little bit more than others. So I'm going to get those put in. So it's whatever I used for the dark light, which was probably a 5.5, now I'm going to go a little bit higher than that. I'm going to couch in this subtle value change. Because it gets it's its darkest right through here. That plane, I mean. Slightly lighter over here. And creates a division between the upper lip and, the lip and the upper part of the mouth. Sorry. here. Between middle light and dark light. Sorry, I'm trying to keep my head out of the way. I need to get an extension arm for my tripod so it doesn't have to be over my shoulder. And I can actually move around a little bit more. Very subtle. I'm going to darken the area in here just a little bit. So I lightened up here. Now I'm going to darken that upper lip just a hair. Had some of that lighter value on there. Starts to pop that upper lip. As I said, I'm going to have to, I know, based on what I'm seeing, I'm grabbing in the 3 value range, which I know is not what's up here because I used the 3 plus or minus for the shadow. So I know what's in this light area, as dark as it is not a 3, but because I'm couching and mixing wet into wet, I have to drop down to a 3 so that when it mixes in with the wet paint that's here already, that it combines to give me the value that I'm looking for. As I said, that's the trick of couching. You got to be very. Sometimes you have to push and pull that paint to get it to do what you want it to do. You just make sure you push that paint around. You don't let that paint push you around. And no fear. Whatever I put down, if it's not right, I can change it. That's why paint control. Talk about the consistency with my students over and over and over again. That thin opaque. It's a consistency that you can work with. It will get the paint down its proper value, but it still gives you room to make adjustments. A little bit of blending. I'm not a big fan brush guy. I tend to do my blending with the tip of my whatever brush I'm working with. The dry brush doing some of that parallel or perpendicular to get everything working together. That's at least how I roll. A little bit darker over there to turn the lip. I'm going to hit up at the top and then work a little bit in the shadow. Basically, I'm just going to focus on this for this. Maybe I'll do a little bit more. I'm feeling kind of good. I got into this a lot faster than I thought. Now I'm seeing that this gradates from darker to slightly lighter at the top. So I'm going to leave the value here. I'm going to gradate this slightly darker on the top. As it goes back, that back edge is just a little darker. I have my maul stick handy. Right? The maul stick is to help me steady my hand so I don't have to rest it on the canvas. There's an area in here where these two, the top plane and the front plane, really do get so close they're almost indiscernible, the difference in between them. Little blending. going to hit the edge, the top edge, just a little bit. Just to soften it just a bit and make some minor adjustments to the drawing. Sorry for my voice. As I get into these delicate areas, sometimes I start holding my breath. I need the most amount of control so I don't make work for myself. That's what I don't want to do. With a slip of the brush, make work for myself. That's no fun. We don't want to do that. A little bit lighter on the top. Just a little bit lighter on the right side. Not quite as light as this. Just a little bit lighter. I'm going to hit the light up here just a little bit harder now that I got that in. Might even have to add just a touch of impasto. It's some physically thick paint to get one thing sitting on top of the other and mixing the way I want. And let's see. A little blending. Just a little touch of a slightly lighter value. Slightly lighter value at the transition right here. You can also push that over and blend for it. Parallel blending, right? So I'm going to keep that boundary. Drawing adjustment, and I'm going to move into the shadow a little bit, just to restate some of the shadows with the same idea. So it's not just in the light. Now I worked from what I said, the light effect, the largest area, the lightest light, and then I just worked out from there. Right now I'm hitting the areas as I move from there. I always have the option. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll hit one area of light, the light effect all the way out to the shadow, then start at another area of light, and work all the way out to the shadow. Today, this video, whatever, it's going to work out, continue working from where I left off, up here. This isn't a terribly complicated form. Who knows, maybe I'll do one of the larger casts at some point, just to show the application. But since the goal with our painting process and procedure is not to just do an endless number of casts, but just to show you application to get the color. So darker cast shadow here, darker cast shadow here. There's a break between the form and the cast shadows right here. Across. Get a little bit of that reflected light, some of the light shadow up under here. More light shadow up under the lip. Get that lip rolling. You can see a little bit here, but there's also some in here. Opens up. I think I'm doing a good job keeping my head out of the way. I think. I'll find out when I go to view this. If I'm not, I'm telling you, I'm working hard to do it. And let's see. Get a little bit of the light. Ooh, moving the camera a little bit. We move over here. Oh, that's a little heavy-handed value-wise. Just a little bit. There we go. As I said, no fear if something gets off track. But boy, it certainly does feel good when you get it back on track. Makes everything so much nicer. Stop there. You know what, while I'm over here, I'm going to hit the edge plane. Am I going to hit the edge plane? The edge, I should say. There's a boundary over here. Side plane. It's the problem with trying to talk and paint at the same time. It's easy to get distracted. There's a side plane and some reflected light over here, just a wisp, which brings this out just a bit more. A happy little side plane, right? We can channel Bob Ross. It's a happy little side plane over here. And a happy little underplane down here. Move up into the lip right here. This can darken just a little bit faster on the front plane as this turns. Whoa, hey now. Whoa, boy. Slow it down there, Neil. Slow it down. There we go. We start in the light effect, then move to other areas of light, move on out. We are all Thomas Kincaid, right? We're all painters of light. We want to focus on the light first and then address the shadow in each area. Light first. That's where all the action is. The drawing back in that shadow just a little bit. There we go. Do a little blending for the Penumbra, if you remember from the last discussion, right? Two types of shadow, form and cast. And the cast shadow has two parts, umbra and penumbra. Umbra, penumbra. This is a cast shadow, umbra, penumbra. Very important. And soften. Here, get the bottom edge of the lip modeled, separated, and then go into the lip itself. That's a little thick. A little side plane right there. Go up in here and hit that light again and move on out from there. lighter. Not quite as light as what's up here, but again, because I'm couching, got to get this paint to mix together properly. And soften a little bit for the penumbra right here. Hit the light in the corner, maybe move the side up. You know what, I'll do a little bit of work right in here and then I'm going to call it a day. So I don't bore you. We've got the pillar of the mouth, which is that form under the lip. Can't remember the anatomical name right now, but as I said, the old noodle isn't what it used to be with some of this stuff. I just do. That's why I always keep plenty of notes. So that if I don't remember, I can look it up. And if I didn't have notes, well, now I have my iPhone. I can always look it up. Lightest part of the form is right here, and then it gradates in this direction. On the edge of the form shadow. There's a division here between cast and form. The form shadow ends right here. The darkest part of the shadow is always right next to the shadow boundary, right? That core of the shadow. And it lightens up a little bit as the reflected light hits it more and more. It's also called the, as I was taught in college, Martha Erlenbacher used to call it the zone of tangency. Idea of the core shadow. It's receiving the least amount of reflected light in the shadow. Just beyond where light is tangent or touching the form, one place. I'll hit the light here and a little bit here, and then that's it. See, that's a problem now. I get in here, and now I can't stop. It's an addiction. It's an addiction. There's something so meditative about making form. Just lose yourself in these gradations. Time slips away. Little bit of an edge, right. Edge meaning there's a little plane in there. Yep, a little bit lighter. And that'll do it. So as I said, this is not just a matter of one pass type of thing. It could take, depending on the complexity of the form, multiple passes. Multiple passes to bring it up to the degree of completion that you want. As I said, even if I were to have gone through this entire thing in this sitting, I still have the finish layer. Finish would be going back and making any drawing touch-ups, any, in this case, value adjustments as necessary that I missed or didn't quite hit completely with the forming layer. Just a little bit more. Slowly moving across the form, making plus or minus value, tonal value adjustments. Just since I'm talking here, right, a reminder, 3 approaches to describing form. Remember I mentioned one of my students, my very witty students, came up with SNOT, S-N-T, S-N-T, spatial, nomenclatural, tonal. So I'm making all these very delicate tonal adjustments where necessary. Chin needs a little adjustment. I'm going to have to, I keep saying it, I know, I keep saying I'm going to stop, but I'm just enjoying myself with these happy little transitions, making me feel fine. I'll tell you what, I'll just soften the edge of the lip and that'll do it. So, obviously I would take whatever amount of time was necessary to make all of these little value changes, get all the little forms in that I didn't get with the fill, and whatever I didn't get with the forming layer, whatever small areas I would get with the finish layer. And again, mention, if I can't finish everything and it dries, well, then I just have to, wherever I end up picking up with the forming, I've got to find that value on my value scale and just get to it, relaying everything, which is why in the old days I was very happy to let things dry and work over them. Now, no way. I want to get as much possibly done while it's wet as possible. It makes my life so much easier than having to match value and get entire areas wet again once they're dry. So, we're going to stop there. I am stopping there at this point. Switch. So that's it. Again, that's abbreviated, but at least you know, it gives you a trajectory where this thing would be going if I spent the time to complete it. So, might as well do a little rehash while we're here. There, the law of transition, right? The rule of 3. Takes minimum of 3 value changes to make a gradation, right? The 2 application methods, couch and mosaic. 2 blending directions, parallel and perpendicular. 3 approaches to describing form, spatial, nomenclatural, and tonal. And now we have 3 stages of the painting, fill, form, and finish. With that, I am signing off. Like and subscribe, and please share, because I'm actually starting to get into these and really enjoy them now. So the more feedback I get, the more I will do. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments section, or if you have any requests for things that you want me to work on, let me know. Thanks for tuning in. See you soon.